of Central Missouri, and we're here today to talk about native accents.
I'm Laura Kanish. I'm an instructor at UCMO with Karen.
And my name is Linda Simanowitz, and I am also at UCMO in Warrensburg, Missouri, about an hour outside of Kansas City.
So NativeAccent is a program, it's a pronunciation program that we use in our English Language Center. So we use it with our undergrad and our graduate programs. So we're going to talk to you guys a little bit about what the program is, how it works, and how we use them with the two different tracks that we do.
Okay, great. So NativeAccent is an online pronunciation tool. It's for non-native speakers of English, and what it does is just assesses their ability to pronounce in the English language. And it's adapted to the learner's first language, and it's also individually based. And so you can create lesson plans for each individual person, and you can also create lesson plans for their particular pronunciation problem. If they're having an issue or some kind of problem with a certain pronunciation, a certain sound, you can create a lesson to go for that sound. And teachers can assign assignments. Students can go in and check their assignments on their own. They can work in and out of the classroom. For me personally, I like to go to the computer lab and work with my students in the lab for some of the time, and then I also assign them outside work, usually about 15 minutes a day, 10 to 15 minutes a day. Because I think that if you do it in smaller chunks rather than long periods of time, just do small chunks every day, they tend to absorb more of the information, and they tend to do better with the native accent. And they can also work at their own pace, they can monitor their progress, they can go back and play their sound, they can listen to themselves, and they can see their progress report on where they're improving, maybe where they didn't do so well, and they can go back and practice. And so we can set assignments up for them. Administrators or teachers can set the assignments up, and they're also interchangeable. So if you have a class of native accent students, and you move on to a level and you need to transfer students over to your class, you can easily go into the system and transfer students over. You can switch them in and out of classrooms, and teachers can switch in and out as well. You can also assign more than one teacher to a class if you're team teaching. And what we also do is we do these assessments. They come with an assessment tool. So at the beginning of the term, if you're assessing your students and you're finding out that maybe one student should not be in this class, they're either higher or lower in the level, you can just move them to another level. So it's very interchangeable, and it's easy to move them in and out of the classrooms. And so the diagnostic tool that I was telling you about tests their grammar, the pronunciation, and provides a list of the sounds that they're having problems with. And so then you can go in and assess them again on that, and they can practice on that particular targeted area.
So this is a snapshot of what a basic lesson will look like when the student begins their lessons. As Karen mentioned, each student has a diagnostic, and it's based on their L1. So if I am the student and my L1 is, I don't know, Russian, for example, these sounds are going to be what I will need to use and go through the process. So as I go through each lesson, there will be a check mark if it is completed. If I have not started a lesson, such as number 6 or number 9, it will say start. And I know that those are ones that I have not yet begun. Now, number 7 has a vision of an alarm clock. So that means that I'm in progress with that one, but I haven't finished it quite yet. And each of these lessons begin with items that are most difficult first, right? We want to get all the difficult stuff out of the way before we move forward. Now, on this next diagram, for example, I'm going to be practicing the OL sound, as in leaf. as you can see here from the back, I'll go ahead and read this piece. It says, for example, for L for leaf, the tip of the tongue touches the hard ridge behind the upper teeth, and the tongue is narrowed and air flows around the sides of the tongue. So this tells me the specific placement of where those mouth movements are. Now, this diagram here will show you a short video of what that visual profile looks like. The second video shows, and you can hear, the movement and the sound of that. So for example, for this one, you'll hear the repeated ooh, ooh, ooh sound. And then on the far right, there are 3 examples of this ooh sound. Example, late, balloon, and fall. This next one here, students can practice and hear any keywords, phrases, and sometimes even full sentences. For example, down here, you'll see the conversation bubble. I can go back and I can play this sound as many times as I need to hear it. When I'm comfortable, I can then click the record button, and that will allow me to record as many times as I would like. And then the last one, the triangle, I can hear the playback of how I sound. If I don't like it, I can try 20 times if I want to, or less, or more. Let's see. At the top here, to the right of where it says exercise 9, you can tell there's many circles that are going across that area. If the circle is not filled in, it means I have not tried that particular sound yet. If it is halfway filled in, then it means that I have attempted to produce that sound. And if it is fully shaded in, then it means that I have done well producing that sound. Now at this point, if I'm ready to continue on, I can click next. And if I am not, I can save my spot here and save and quit in the upper right hand corner. Down below, there are some examples of words or phrases or sentences that are examples.
Sure. Okay. Can I just pop back to yours really quick?
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to say that down at the bottom here, this is an example of some immediate feedback that students are getting when they are practicing. So for you guys in the back, I don't know if you can see it, but for example, the word bullet, the L in bullet is highlighted in green to tell students that they did a good job producing that sound. If it's highlighted in yellow, it was okay, they probably need to try it again. And then if it's highlighted in red, it was not so great, and then they're probably going to have a partially filled in circle at the top. They can always go back and practice that word again and try to get it. Okay, so you're probably thinking, ooh, this sounds really cool, but how do I use this in my intensive English program? So, to talk a little bit about how we use it, one thing that we like about it is you can monitor how much time students have used practicing. So you can take a look at how much time in general they've used just on the program, but you can also go through and see how much time that they've spent on individual lessons. So if they say, hey, I practiced this one and it was really easy and whatever, and then you go and you see they only spent 2 minutes on it, maybe they need to go back and do it again. So you can also, aside from looking at how much time they've spent, you can see their performance by percentage. So I don't know if you noticed on, let's see if I can go back here, on the, where was I? On this one, you'll see that there are some stars on each lesson. They each represent 25%. So if you only have 1 star on there, you probably didn't do a great job on that lesson. If you have all 4, yay, good job. So you can go through and see exactly what percentage your students got on that particular lesson. And if you choose to, you can set a threshold for what it means to pass any particular lesson. So I think the default is like 70 or 75% for what is considered passing. But if you want to set it lower or higher, you can do that if you want to. As a teacher, in each class that you've set up, you also have the choice of going through and listening to your students' recordings, which can be beneficial to figure out if it's actually your student doing the recording. We had a gentleman, I think last year, whose girlfriend was doing all the recordings for him, so he didn't get a lot of points for that assignment. And then you can also go through and check out when the last time was that your students logged in. So if they say, oh yeah, I practiced this week and everything was really easy, and you go in and you see they haven't been on it in 2 weeks, then they're full of baloney. Okay. Another cool thing about it is you can visually see how students have increased or decreased in their skill for that sound. So if you look up here at the top at the key, the blue color is for the diagnostic that students did at the very beginning of the session. So that was just kind of the baseline, what they can do, what they can't do. The green color is, so this is one of my current students I have right now. The green is basically where she was like last week. So this first line is just a sample of some of the sounds that she's been working on. So you'll see she does have some where she has gotten better and some where she's gotten a little bit worse. So if you take a look, like this one for example, you can see that she's increased quite a bit. And this one that she's increased quite a bit. Because those are 2 lessons where we did specific in-class practice, and then she went and got back online and did some more practice with this. Some of these are some that we haven't specifically worked on in class. And the thing is, when students are doing their practice, it's recording everything they say for that whole word or the whole phrase. So it's not just the target sound that's being recorded, it's recording other parts of the words too. So if one of these sounds was in part of the recordings, maybe they're just focusing really hard on that target sound, and so they're not trying so hard on some of the other sounds. So their skill level can decrease a little bit. And let's see. Okay, so like said, in our program we do have 2 different tracks. We have our undergrad track and our graduate track, and we use NativeAccent a little bit differently in each one. So I want to talk a little bit about what the teacher role is for each one and what the student role is for each one. So for our undergrads, we do have 9 levels in our undergraduate program. So we're using NativeAccent for levels 3 through 9. Levels 1 and 2 are really basic if students come in and don't know a whole lot, so the vocabulary can be a little bit challenging for them. So we're just doing 3 through 9. So for undergrad, we're basically just looking at how much time they're practicing. We're not so much we're not grading them on improvement, we're grading them on how much time they've completed. Because basically if students are practicing, they're improving. Nobody's spending a bunch of time on this program and not improving. And then we also go through and listen to recordings so we can figure out if there's some things that we might want to talk about in class, or if we want to pull students aside and say, hey, I noticed you had some trouble with this particular sound. Do you want to talk to me about it? So for the students, we ask them to complete somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes of practice per week. So that adds up to about 3 or 5 lessons. So each lesson is maybe 10 or 15 minutes long, depending on how much time each student is dedicating to that lesson. Our sessions, we have 2 8-week sessions per semester. So if you're taking into account the first week and then the last week, you know, kind of initial assessments and finals and that sort of thing, students get about 5 or 6 weeks of practice per 8-week session. So while they are focusing on their NativeAccent lessons, they're also doing they're doing weekly reflection pieces to kind of think about what they've done well, what they need to improve on, how in general did the lessons from that week improve their pronunciation. And then on that reflection, they can also ask questions for the teacher. Hey, I'm having trouble with my V's and my W's. Can we talk about this? Or, hey, everything I practiced this week was awesome. I feel really good about it. At the end of the session, we also do a final self-evaluation. So students think about, okay, during the session, these were the sounds that were easy for me, and these were the sounds that were difficult for me. Here's what I want to work on in the future. Here's when I think I might use this, that sort of thing. Okay, so for the graduate students, it's a little bit different. We do all of the same things that we do with the undergrads, but there's a little bit extra to it. So, in our undergrad program, we're using NativeAccent as part of our communication skills class, but for our graduate students, it's been made the basis of our accent reduction class. So we do have an accent reduction class with the undergrads, but it's a totally different setup. So, again, we're basing it on completion and not so much improvement. But what we're doing differently with the graduates is we're assigning specific lessons for students to work on. And I'll show you an example of that here in a second. Okay, so with students in the graduate program, we're doing like in-class specific pronunciation practice. And then students have a chance to then, after that, get onto NativeAccent and work on those specific sounds. And then if they want to do some practice on other sounds and things afterwards, they can do that too. So that would be the self-study after they complete the lessons that their teacher has assigned them. They're also doing the weekly reflection of what was hard, what was easy, what do I need to still work on. And then they have their final self-evaluation at the end. Here's how I feel about my pronunciation now. More or less confident, hopefully more if they've been coming to class and doing the work. So, for example, so again, this is from my graduate class that I'm teaching this session. So from the diagnostic that students did at the beginning of the session, I can go through and see which sounds they in general had the most trouble with and which sounds weren't so difficult for them. So, and I guess I should mention, NativeAccent isn't only, it's mostly pronunciation, but there are a few grammar points in there they can work on. They can also work on some word stress and fluency if they want to. So if you look up here in this drop down, if I want to choose particular lessons for students to work on, I can choose pronunciation from there, or word stress, or grammar, or whatever I want to do. For my class specifically, we were just working on pronunciation. So I went through and chose pronunciation, and then I can go under performance and organize it by what's been the most difficult for them to what's not so hard. So, for example, most of my graduate students, their L1 is Telugu. So, for example, an issue that they had, or some sounds they had issues with, were like V's and W's, for example. So we spent one of our 50-minute classes working on like minimal pairs and using words in short stories, talking specifically in class and using mirrors so they can see what their mouth is supposed to do. And then I go through and I take my W and my V and I pull it over and put it into their specific lesson plan. And then they have to complete those 2 lessons before they can go on and do any other lessons from NativeAccent. So what I did is I used the diagnostic from the beginning, and I also used, when Karen was talking at the beginning, it had that list of some of the specific sounds that are difficult for students. I went through and looked at that and saw how many people are having trouble with that specific sound, and kind of organized my lesson plan for the session around that. So each day we'd work on something different. One day was like L's, and another day was V's and W's. Another day was ch and j. So, and the thing was, it was a lot of fun. Students really loved working on stuff in class and pairing up with each other, having the mirrors to work on stuff, and then being able to work on it by themselves, go home and do stuff, and kind of figure things out on their own. And let me see. Okay. So again, this is from that same student that I've been pulling from. You can see here on the left-hand side are some of the lessons that I have given for this session. So for example, let's see, if I want to look at J versus CH here, I can see that she has spent 16 minutes working on that particular lesson. I can see when she first visited, when she last visited, so when she signed in, and then I can also check out over here at the side how well she did. So she's got a 59% in those 2 particular sounds. However, like L's and R's, you can see that she's only got a 9%, so that was pretty challenging for her. as it was for most of the class. So that might be something that she wants to go back and work on. P's and B's, 97%. Hey, awesome. So, and I found all of these sounds that I made lessons for were sounds that students had a lot of trouble with at the beginning of the session. So when I see at this point that she's got a 97%, I feel like I actually was able to teach something. So, let's see. I think Karen is next. So Karen's going to talk a little bit about benefits to universities and teachers in general about the program.
So, the interesting thing about this program is that it has over 50 native languages that you can work with. So there should be something there for most of your students. It accommodates multiple operating systems. So it's very adaptable to whatever you have. It's internet accessible. It's cost effective. And so we find that we like to use this for undergrad and graduate, as Laura said. And our students benefit tremendously from this. And we find it to be a really nice tool for our students in our university. They have the basic and the regular versions. So the basic version would be like in our 9 levels, we would use basic for levels 3 to 5. And then from 6 to 9, we use the regular version. They're pretty much, they work the same way. It's just that the basic is just a little bit easier. The material and the content is a little bit easier for the lower levels. But they work basically the same way. And there's also, NativeAccent is coming out with a new version, a version 4. And it's going to have more accurate speech recognition software, tools for creating custom content, and mobile friendly on tablets. So they're always improving the NativeAccent, coming out with new versions and new tools and things that we can use. And so it's kind of fun just to follow it along and get the updated version to keep working with our students. It's really a great tool for that. And this is our contact information, our email addresses, the university if you would like to contact us. And we also have David here, who's a representative from Carnegie Speech. We've been working with him for a few years now. So, do you want to introduce him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want
David,
to
you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm David Oberlin. I'm Vice President of Global Education for Carnegie Speech. And we've been working with UCMO since 2011. And so we are grateful for this partnership. Thank you.
And he has materials, we were talking about it being cost effective. He has materials here and prices and things like that if you're
Sure.
interested. Or
I actually don't have enough for everyone here. However, I do have a table downstairs if you want to drop by. I'd be happy to send you our product information and price list. I have maybe 10 or 15 price lists. Anyway, thank you.
Does anyone
Thanks,
have any
Amy.
questions?
Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, sure.
for us?
Could you explain how the diagnostic is done?
Sure. We use contrastive linguistic analysis of the first language of the learner to determine what their most likely errors are. The assessment takes about 30 minutes for NativeAccent and about 5 minutes for basics. The basics consists of 10 sentences that they record, and they're very simple. And NativeAccent they're only assessing pronunciation and word stress in basics. In NativeAccent, it takes about 30 minutes and consists of 89 sentences that they record. They record the scripts, and those scripts are balanced to discover what the weakest skills are, and then the intelligent tutor selects from 5,000 activities the ones that are most appropriate for each individual student. So it's individualized instruction, and it adapts based on the intelligent tutoring technology. So as their skill levels increase, they're not constantly being taught the same things over and over again. It moves them on to something different when they can demonstrate mastery of that particular skill. However, we scaffold each skill 3 times. So in that case, we kind of circle the wagons and make sure that they've learned that skill even after they've initially demonstrated proficiency. Thank you.
I have two questions. One is, what kind of classes do you use? If it's a phonetics class, if it's a IEP class, is it listening speaking class? And my second question is, how do you deal with English accents, the different English accents?
Okay, so we have different classes that we use it in depending on if it's grad or undergrad. So for our undergraduate students, we're using it as, it's about 10% of their grade in their communication skills class. So that's basically just a speaking and listening class. With our graduate students, this is basically the whole class. They meet about twice a week for 50 minutes. We do maybe 30 minutes of pronunciation practice in class, working in pairs, talking about what you're doing with your mouth. And then if we have time at the end, they can get started in class and do their online practice, or if they don't finish or if they don't get started, then it's homework.
And if I can add to that, one of the other benefits, as I think Karen was talking about also, is the great thing about this is each student has their own login because this is web-based. And they have a separate email, separate private logon, and so there's no way that if one of Karen's students and one of my students, they can't log on to the same thing because everyone has individual access. So that's one of the additional benefits too.
So did that answer your question about accents?
The accents? No, about like English, American accents, different accents, like some parts here in the country, they stress something more than, so I don't know if the program
the
recognizes
model
that.
speakers are college graduates from the Midwest as the standard in California. So those are the model speakers that are presented. However, the determination of whether their pronunciation is correct or not depends on how far they are away from that standard. So we have a statistical model of how it should sound, and then their recording is compared to that statistical model. And so it provides this color-coded feedback. If it's almost correct, it's yellow background. If it's correct, it's green background. And if it's not correct, it's a red background. If it's either yellow or red, then they have a prompt where they can practice again. So it doesn't take into account, for example, somebody from Louisiana or East Tennessee, where I used to live, and there's just variation. In England, there are 60 different accents in England. So we basically try to not make everyone speak the same, but make everyone understandable. That's the goal. Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
I have two questions, but I missed the very beginning.
Oh, for sure.
So I don't know if these were addressed. Can this be used as a self-study tool alone, independently from class?
Yeah, absolutely. That's basically what we do with the undergrad students. So we just say, you need to practice, depending on the teacher, 45 to 60 minutes per week. You can practice anything you want. And so then they have a weekly worksheet that they have to fill out to tell their teacher what they worked on, what was hard, what was easy, and how in general they think it helped their pronunciation.
And is this something that they can download on their iPhones? Or is this a software that the program has to buy?
I mean, it's a web-based, it's nothing that you have to download. It's a web-based program. So it's just like if you're getting onto any online website, it's cloud-based, right?
Yes.
It's a
Yeah.
cloud-based application. Version 4, which will be available in January, will be available on iOS devices as well as Android devices.
So the student can buy it on their own and do it independently if we recommend it to them? Or does it have to be part of?
Yeah, they can buy
No,
it on their own.
they can, so we have several different ways of purchasing the software. Institutional purchases are the most popular. However, for individual students, we have a school partnership program which provides a discount code to allow the student to purchase it at a significant discount off the list price. And if you see me downstairs, I'll be happy to hook you up.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
I noticed your examples had sounds in the initial, medial, and final positions. Do you have exercises with sounds in combination?
you talking like two different sounds that they're targeting in the
Like
same?
final consonants, for example. I teach a lot of Vietnamese speakers, and they tend not to pronounce final consonants, or final consonant clusters can be very challenging for them. And I'm just wondering if your product has some sound combinations for
They
practice.
do indeed. So we do consonant clusters. Linkage is big. We have 8 fluency skills, so that includes linkage with consonants and vowels, palatalization, reduction of the H sound, and those sorts of things that are good for that population in particular. Yes.
Hi, I was one of the instructors in our department who piloted American speech sounds. Are you familiar with
Sure.
that?
Yeah.
And we, in the end, found out it would be cost effective for our program. How is this program different than that?
I don't know how their pricing works because they don't share that with
Right,
me.
obviously.
So the way that it's cost effective, it depends on the program and what your threshold is for that. Most of the programs that we work with are at intensive English programs, and they find that an institutional concurrent license, which is essentially an internet workstation license, it's not tied to one workstation, it's an internet seat, is the most cost effective, and that can be as low as $60 per student. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So what is sort of the weight between on individual phonemes and then on the more fluency aspects? Like how much of, because I think for my students it's really the fluency that they need. It's the stress and the duration and those sort of things.
So one of the things that you can do with NativeAccent that we didn't address here is you can tune the course so that the percentage of curriculum in each of the 4 skill areas is balanced based on what you want to teach. So it could be 60% pronunciation, 20% fluency, and so on. Or it could be 60% fluency, 20% pronunciation. You as a teacher tune the course to match what you want to teach.
Other questions? No? Like I said, if you have any other questions for us, feel free to email us. If you want to take a look at our PowerPoint, we can always share that with you. And then, of course, you can always email David because he knows everything. So,
He has a table downstairs if you want to visit with him downstairs.
so thank you for coming. We appreciate your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.